watching Reality Survival. So today, I thought we would talk a little bit about the pros and cons and just some of the differences and maybe some of the things that, in the ways that these things complement each other. So we're talking about a small inverter generator. This is a dual fuel model that runs off of propane and gasoline from Westinghouse. It's the iGen 2550 DFC, and I'll put a link to as much of this stuff as I can down below. And then over here is a little solar generator from Yolanus. It's a 1536 watt hour solar generator. And we've got some different solar panels and all that kind of stuff. So I guess let's talk about the pros and cons of these generators here first. Then we'll move to the solar generator. Little generator, inverter generators like this are good because they are quieter. And they're probably a little bit better, more fuel efficient for the energy and that you get. And that's the main benefit from them. However, there's a couple of things, I think there's a couple of misconceptions that people have about these generators in general. And so I want to talk about those first. Number one is that these little inverters, they're only really made to be run like 4 to 6 hours at a time. They're not 100% duty cycle type engine. And the way that you can tell that you know that, is when you look at the oil change cycle on these things. And the first oil change is after 24 hours. And the second and reoccurring oil changes is every 50 hours. So that tells you right there that, you know, these things are not made to be run 2 days straight. Because you have to be changing the oil every couple of days, right? So if you find yourself in a situation where you're relying upon a little inverter generator for a long period of time, you need to be really, really diligent about changing your oil every couple of days. And there's only about a third it's like 0.37 of a quart, like less than half of a quart, a little more than a third of a quart, less than half of a quart of oil, 10W30 oil inside these little guys. And maybe your particular generator might have a little more, a little less, but when you're running around a half a quart to 3/4 of a quart of oil or whatever, that tells you right there, you do not have, it is not made to run long time for long hours, because the viscosity of that oil will break down and you'll start to get heat buildup, and you'll get engine damage, and eventually that they'll break. So what these are good for, in my position, or in my frame of thinking anyway, for preppers, is they're quieter and they're a little more fuel efficient. I can run them off of propane, which I can stock propane up at my house, and it lasts for pretty much ever. It doesn't really ever go bad. Very, very long time, and I mean they're really, it's pretty much indefinite. Whereas I would recommend not using gasoline in these things, because in my view, from the time that you put gasoline into it, you start a clock for when that carburetor is going to end up getting clogged. All right. Now, that's not to say that you can't have, propane issues and all that kind of stuff too. It's just less frequent, in my opinion. You get gasoline put in these, especially if you've had the gasoline for a year or so, and you've been storing it in your shed and it's not stored in the greatest conditions and all that kind of stuff. You'll find that you'll end up getting, the gunk will get caught up in the carburetor bowl and all that, and then it just starts to run bad. And that's universally true with any machine, unless you regularly and continually kind of run gas through it on a regular basis, then you're going to have problems if it sits for a long time. Because what happens is there's a little bit of fuel in the bottom of that bowl, and in those parts in the carburetor, and when it sits there and the material that can evaporate evaporates, it leaves behind a sticky little film of gunk, and that starts to mess up the inner works. Whereas LP is a little bit more clean burning for the most part. So, and you don't get that kind of buildup residue, and it'll cycle through the majority of the fuel and everything when it's burning it off. Now, there is another downside though to running liquid propane in these little guys here. This one, if you're running gasoline, you'll get 2,550 peak watts, and then you'll get 1,800 running watts. But with liquid propane, you get 2,300 peak watts and 1,600 running watts. So you get less power. There's less BTUs in propane than there is in gasoline. So that is something to consider if you're, really maxing out the, how much you want to squeak out of the generator. You might want to run gasoline in that case. From a long-term perspective, it's great that you can store a lot of propane, but eventually that'll run out, right? And if they were in a situation where we were talking a grid down situation or something like that, finding somebody who could refill that liquid propane, or finding other liquid propane tanks that still have fuel in them, might be hard to come by. So then you would be left with only using gas, which is probably going to be a little easier to find for quite a while, but eventually that's going to run out too on a long enough timeline. So fuel is a major consideration. How are you going to fuel it? What do you have on hand, and all that kind of stuff. I think of these as basically a battery charger. That's sort of the way that I look at this for charging these solar generators. And I've managed to pick up a few different ones of these now, and this is probably going to be the most efficient way to power or to recharge these batteries, at least in my view anyway, because running my large 12,000 watt whole house generator I'm burning more fuel than I need to in a situation where I'm trying to ration. And I'm probably only going to run that generator whenever I need to run my well, or my big heater or something along those lines. But and even then I'm probably not going to run the heater, but it's mostly going to be when I'm going to run the well. So that's the primary pros and cons of this. Oh, if you're going to use these, if you're going to rely on these are great, but you really got to keep up on the maintenance schedule. Every couple of days of use, you got to change that oil. There's only a little bit in there. That's the main thing I want you to remember, because if you don't, and you keep running it, and you keep using it, that oil will break down. You're going to start getting heat buildup and metal shavings and everything, and they will break. I can just assure you. And the other thing is almost all of these are made in China, and so the quality factor on them is also, kind of depends. I mean, it really, it could be very hit and miss on the quality control on these things too. So something to think about from that regard. Okay, so let's talk about solar generators. Solar generators are great, especially for short-term type situations where maybe you're only going to be without power for a few hours to, a day or something like that, which is like the majority of situations. You just need to run a few devices. You could even have 3, 4, 5 of them and be able to run kind of all the things around the house. That's kind of my goal is to get several of them so that I can kind of just take the little solar generators to wherever I need and let them run the issue, or let them run the appliance or whatever it is that I'm using, and be good to go. And then I'll get several of the lithium-ion batteries to hook in conjunction with it to give it additional capacity. And then I can use, through a rotational system, I can use a little inverter to charge these things back up, because it's going to charge them back up. This one will charge back up in like an hour and a half. Whereas if I was going to do it with the solar, it might be all day or a day and a half. Because up here in New Hampshire where I'm at, in the wintertime, we don't get a lot of purely sunny days. We get a lot of overcast days and a lot of cloudy days and all that, and that's how it's been so far this year. So solar panels are great when you have sun. But if you don't have sun, you're kind of screwed because they don't put out very much at all. I had this 400 watt set up for a video the other day, and it was overcast, and it was putting out like 40 watts. You know, and it would take a month of Sundays to charge that thing up to 40 watts. This is another type of panel. This is a semi-flexible panel that you can get. It's a little easier to store. This is from RV. It's a 100 watt panel. It's got MC4 connectors on it, and it's got little grommets built into it. I'll show you up close here. It's a pretty cool little panel. I'm excited to get it out and try it. Kind of, you know, really good for like RVers or people that are going camping or glamping, or if you had your bug out loadout where you wanted to have, you know, easy panels to throw in someplace that are really light. These are the way to go. If you want something a little more robust that all powers, that's 5 80 watt panels that fold out, or fold up into one thing. They've got little legs on it. I've got a video, you can look on that. And then these are a couple of RV 200 watt rigid panels that I made into like a little suitcase where they fold up and it's got legs and it comes out and it stands up on its own. And so you can have lots of different options for dealing with this stuff. But you got to be in a place where you have good sun. Now, the great thing about this, one of the pros of the solar generators and using solar panels is you really reduce your sound signature significantly because it's silent, basically. You know, you might have some noise coming from the solar generator when it's charging, when the fans turn on, but you're talking about very minimal, you know, very minimal, especially if you're more than 10 yards away, you're probably not going to hear it at all. You do have an increased visual signature because people see that you've got solar panels, right? It's not, they're going to have to be set out in the open sun and all that kind of thing. So it's not like it's entirely stealthy, you know. You do have some signature there, but the really great part about it is you can go on charging these units for as long as those panels are good, 20, 30 years, maybe longer. You know, that's a long time that these panels are gonna work to charge these things, and that's the batteries on these things. The lithium iron phosphate batteries are rated for 3,500 cycles, 3,500 to 4,000, depending on the manufacturer, cycles, and to maintain 80% of their charge or more. So, you know, conceivably, you could really even use these things 20 years or so also without any problems. You might have reduced capacity, but they're still going to work pretty good. So the other thing you need to think about is all the cables and the connections and all that kind of stuff. Where are you gonna set these things out? Are you gonna have enough, you know, cable for, you know, to hook everything up? Do you have the DC charger if you want to charge this with your vehicle, which, you know, you can do for pretty much all of them. Does it have all the right ends, and do you have all the right accoutrement, you know, associated with using these things? Because it seems like every different brand has different connections and different cables. So that can be a little bit of a pain in the ass, to be honest, in switching from one brand to another and all that kind of stuff, because now you've got to have lots of different kinds of connections. The MC4 seem to be the most popular on the solar panel side of it, but even some of those are going to the DC, like 5521 connectors, or the Anderson power pole connectors. I mean, it really just depends on what you get. So you want to try to make sure that you have the ability to either have a lot of those extra cables, or just kind of standardize it. Like, do your research, and if you're going to buy 3 or 4 of the solar generators, then get 3 or 4 of the same brand. That way your cable setup is easy. The other cool thing about this one, I'll go back up for a second, is you can run these bad guys in parallel. So you can get another one just like it and run a couple of wires to the other one, and you can end up doubling your productivity on your power output. So that's kind of cool too. And again, you can do that with the batteries on these, like I talked about as well, adding a lithium iron phosphate 12-volt battery to these to increase the capacity too. Ultimately, I don't really think that you should pick one or the other. I think, to me, the most sound decision is to pick both and use the one to complement the other. That's the thing that makes the most sense to me. And you know, there's different systems that are coming out now with, like, the EcoFlow has got their own generators. I think the Blue Yeti does too. And that's a great thing, because then you got a DC generator. It's not an AC generator like these. It's a DC to DC generator. You get less loss and they charge even faster. That's a great system as well, doing something like that. I don't know. But I think that having the ability to make your own power on at least a small scale is something that we all need to be thinking about. It's becoming more and more popular to hear people talking about how the grid is going to go down. Now, whether or not that is predictive programming, letting everybody know, hey, there's going to be power grid issues, or it's part of the plan, or because it's just bad policy decisions, and they know that it's going to happen because of all the green tech and all that kind of stuff that they're doing that doesn't make any sense, or because the infrastructure is aging and it's old, or because there's cyber attacks. Like, there's lots and lots of things that are piling up when it comes to power production, of what I would call, from a counterintelligence field, as indicators. These are indicators, and when you start to see multiple indicators in one area, that's when you raise the red flag and you say, hey, we need to pay attention to this threat. And that is why I'm talking about this to you guys so much, because I think that the power grid is especially vulnerable right now, and I think you need to have your own ability to produce your own power. I'm also an affiliate with Grid Down, and Grid Down offers a whole home battery system that is really awesome, and I can save you 7% on that if you use the discount code Reality Survival. And those are high ticket items; they're expensive, but you can get your tax credit off of those. So that's like 30%, plus you get the 7% discount with using Reality Survival. So that's almost 40% off right there. And then the way you can set those up, you can make it totally off grid, or you can make it where it ties in with the grid and you sell some power back, so that over a long enough timeline, you might get some return on the investment. Or you can just be off grid and just be free from, having an electric bill and stuff. When I make my retirement house, that's my plan, is I'm going to try to get one of these systems and just not even have an electric bill. I just want to be completely off grid. But anyhow, there's challenges with all these things. If you're in really cold environments, back up one quick, if you're in really cold environments, these solar generators, you might have decreased capacity on these because they don't charge well when they're under 32 degrees. So that is something to consider for you folks who are way up north. They may not be the best thing. Something like that might be better. And the lithium iron phosphate batteries in general might not be as good. You might want to go with, like, the AGM glass mat batteries. They're a little bit better in colder temperatures too. So, just a discussion. I didn't have any notes. This is just off the top of my head. So if I missed some pros and cons, I would love for you to put those down in the comments below. That way we can all kind of learn from it and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to live the 6 Ps. Proper prior preparation prevents poor performance. And don't forget to download our cell phone app, American Prepping Academy, on both iTunes, or the Apple Store, whatever it's called, and the Google Play Store. It's a free app, and it will notify you every time that we download any videos. We've also got 15 other prepping channels on there as well. So check that out, American Prepping Academy. Take care.